We were talking about the rapture in 70 AD, and we've got these books, Taken to Heaven in AD 70. I haven't got into that yet. And the 70 AD, the end of the world, we got into that some. Probably most of you have read at least a little of that. And this book here, Taken to Heaven, relates a third book on this subject, the most influential of them all. And it's Ed Stevens. You might know Ed from Facebook.
You are about to experience Jackson Snyder Presents, direct from the AD and Yahshua, a Hebrew Nation radio original program. JSP is a variety show seeking out Jewish and Christian origins, religion, theology, and history, and doing so in a fashion that is both educational and entertaining. Welcome to Jackson Snyder Presents.
We were talking about the rapture in 70 AD, and we've got these books, Taken to Heaven in AD 70. I haven't got into that yet. And the 70 AD, the end of the world, we got into that some. Probably most of you have read at least a little of that. And this book here, Taken to Heaven, relates a third book on this subject, the most influential of them all. And it's Ed Stevens. You might know Ed from Facebook. He's the head of the whole preterist movement in the whole world. And the name of that book is Expectations Demand of First Century Rapture. I have that book. I've had it for probably 5 years. I read it cover to cover, full of question and some answers. Personally, I think that Revelation 7 plus 14 are proof enough for me as to why we were talking about why didn't it get written up someplace in some early writing? Well, it didn't get written up probably because there was so much confusion and there were so many Jews that got taken away to slavery and there were so many that died then, and that in Revelation 7 it talks about not Gentiles but the recreated Jews. 12 tribes of Israel go up. And then you wonder, we have got these stories about Peter being crucified upside down, Paul being beheaded, who else? Jude being killed by the sword, James by the sword, all this stuff. But there is nothing written down about that except hundreds of years later in some perhaps fictional accounts. So where are these guys? They all seem to disappear at the same time. They all seem to disappear from Jerusalem, actually. Maybe these accounts of their death, which are, by the way, if you haven't read them, they're fantastical. All kinds of miracles happen. All kinds of angels are around. All kinds of miracles are being done. I'm wondering if any of them really died in that. Maybe they were taken away. Maybe the entrance to a rapture is death. I hardly expect my body to be taken along in a rapture situation. Although we could manifest bodies easy enough, because if you're a fourth dimensional being, as Carl Sagan said, you could show yourself any way you wanted. You could walk through walls, walk through doors, and you could turn a human being inside out if you wanted to. So that's what I'm thinking. I feel clear about it. You know, what we find in Revelation 14 is up on Mount Zion, the top of Mount Zion. Talks a little about this in 2 Peter 3 as well. They're all up there on Mount Zion, such as it is, kind of looking over the edge. Yahshua dressed for battle, and all these, what they call in their saints, Kadoshim, are with him. And Josephus reports these armies up in the sky, and with that and the disappearance of all these people, I mean, what if it was a literal 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe, with the exception of the tribe of Dan? What if they disappeared? Who would know?
No, nobody would know because the chaos that was going on at that time.
For sure.
Nobody. How would you even know?
That's a good question. All we have really, and some others, but Revelation 7, Revelation 14, if they have anything to do with what was going on in 70 AD and during that time period, then just read the description. They are up in the air. And we know they're all dead because when John, I guess, or somewhat, no, when the saints, they want vengeance. They want blood vengeance.
Yeah.
And Yahshua tells them the angel says, when the cup is full, the cup of the blood of the saint. I'm glad you agree with me on that.
Oh, see, I'm one of those guys that think that if something's proven kind of historically, or at least as proven as we can get, I mean, yes, it makes sense to me. Josephus testifies of all of it. He testifies of the armies in the sky. He's not the only one. There's two other ancient witnesses, and I can't recall their names. I know you probably know them, but they write of the same thing, seeing the armies of heaven in the sky,
Tacitus and Dio, those are the other two.
Yes, yeah. So, so what? Do we believe such a thing? Well, it matches the scripture. The wars, I'm almost to the point where I use the term scriptures very loosely, because I feel like Josephus, the wars should almost be included in scripture.
I definitely do. And I think that he was converted.
Oh, I definitely think he was converted. I listened to a lecture. Actually, it might have been by you. One of ours. I'm not sure. I watched so many, but it was pretty much proven, at least logically, through the thought process they took it through. I was convinced. I was like, yeah, he most definitely probably was a believer.
Well, you know that before Jewish War came out in Greek, it came out in Aramaic, which is supposedly lost. But I agree. I asked Robert Eisenman about this. I said, what about Slavonic Josephus? What do you think? Is that not Aramaic Josephus written, retranslated into Slavonic, as a lot of old church literature was? And yes. He says, yes, definitely. I said, why don't scholars fess up to that? Well, what are they going to do with a Josephus that obviously believes? Because in that Slavonic Aramaic version, which I have been rewriting for the last 2 years, someday I'll get it done.
I have a translation of it, actually.
There's so much about believers in there.
Yeah, there is.
The wonder worker, the wild man, the disciples are in there. So
that's why they won't grow, because they will not accept truth. That's why they won't accept the Nazarene Acts. Because if you receive the Nazarene Acts, you have to, by nature, question Paul. You have to. Because if the Nazarene Acts is true, then the book of Acts paints Paul in a different picture. I mean, it just does. I think Acts is the record of the journeys of Paul, and predominantly in the Nazarene Acts are the sayings and writings of Peter. I mean, and who do we follow? I follow Peter every single time over Paul, just because Peter, because that speech that Peter gave about Simon Magus. And I know a lot of people think that he was talking about Paul, but I don't. I believe he was speaking of Simon Magus and about Simon Magus.
Yeah, I agree with you.
However, that being said, if you compare a lot of the type of doctrinal things, it is just a very small step from that to what Paul was teaching. So, that kind of makes me wonder too sometimes. With Paul, I can take Paul or leave Paul. I think as far as resurrection goes, I believe what Yeshua said, I think, and what John said. I think we're gonna see him. We're gonna be like him. And we know that Yeshua had a physical component to his body, but he was walking through walls and all kinds of stuff. And that's, I think, is that fourth, that quote unquote spiritual. Because see, when I say spiritual, I don't mean ghostly. I mean heavenly, fourth dimension or whatever it is, but something just as real as we are, but not necessarily ghostly, just different, just a different dimension. I think that's what he is. I think that's what we'll be when we're reborn into the kingdom.
And I think that that's exactly what these devils are, these shadow men, that they are fourth dimensional beings that can only, like in this dimension, they can only manifest the shadow. They probably don't even know they're in here, but what else would it be? Good exegesis there. How about you, Craig? You're next. Then we got Melissa. Hello?
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, I think Jesse Miller had said something about Paul that I liked on Facebook, that he was a Torah observant son of Benjamin. And I think we have to certainly be careful, but also be careful with how I think a lot of people just dismiss him too. And I don't think that that's necessarily a healthy thing to do.
Exactly right. It's like they hate him.
And that leads to people. It leads to people denying Yeshua. It's a slippery slope. And so I think what Jesse said there, and I think it's healthy that, for whatever reason he's there, he takes up that much of our scripture, that's got to be, it's got to be something of value there, and something that we shouldn't speak against, I don't think, ever.
No, I don't think so either. But I did for a while.
It's hard not to. You really get twisted. It's really hard. Some of this stuff is just put on a shelf and not really mess with it, at least myself personally, because I know what he can't be saying, though, too, being a Torah observant son of Benjamin.
Well, that's one of the things that David Hanatsari, you know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Brad Brink.
Yeah.
Brad was a bishop in this group, and he hated Paul.
Yeah.
And when I came around to saying, we got to look at the good things of Paul, that's what ticked him off.
You have to, and
That ended our relationship.
Well, that's too bad.
It is too bad.
Well, I think it's Lashon Hara in the utmost degree to be talking. I mean, I think even, in what book is it where Michael won't talk bad about Hasatan?
Mm-hmm. That's in the Jude, I think.
Yeah,
Jude.
Yeah, you won't speak ill of Hasatan. Like, we really have to be careful. Even when we read stories of the Old Testament, it's very easy to paint people in a negative light in our minds. And that's not what we're supposed to be doing with any of this, I don't think so.
It's a pretty thin line, man.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to do, and especially with Paul, because it's so polarizing. But I think that that ultimately we have to, maybe know what he can't be saying sometimes, I guess, too.
Well, it's like Sean said about the Nazarene Act. That's certainly, when they're talking about Simon Magus, they're talking about Simon Magus there, not Paul. There's nothing in there that Simon Magus says that tracks with anything Paul said, with the exception of perhaps Colossians 1 and 2, which are supposedly the Gnostic chapters of Paul. Okay, Melissa, good observation.
Well, I had a good point, but now I don't remember what it was.
Okay, write it down on your hand next time.
Well, I know one thing that I wanted to say is that when somebody was saying, I'll take Peter over Paul any day, I really disagree, because Yeshua called Peter Satan in the Gospels, I'm pretty sure.
Was he calling Peter?
He actually betrayed Christ by denying him thrice. You know what I mean? Paul never denied him thrice. So I would really take Paul over Peter. And, I know what the question was. I wanted to ask you, when Yeshua says that they want the old wine because they think the old is better, they don't desire new, what's he referring to that's new that they don't desire? If it's the exact same thing, then it wouldn't be different. It wouldn't be new wine.
They like the old, right? That's because the old is fermented. The new wine.
Yeah, but new wine has to be put in new bottles, and they both be preserved. So, I mean, you have to be born again, and you have to accept the new covenant and the new wine, unless you don't think it's as good. So it was hard for me, because I first hated Paul. That's how I met Laverne. And I mean, I was going on with that for a while, and then I really wanted to find a group. And I thought, it just didn't seem like there was anywhere that really looked like they were following Christ, except for, some of these plain communities. And I started to give Paul another chance. And then I feel like I related to him because I went through things that he kind of describes in my walk. So I started to say, maybe this guy is right about some stuff. Yeah. So I don't know if I got deceived and got led down the wrong road, but I think that I'm accepting Paul, and I had to have peace and just say, you know what? I'm just going to believe that Yahweh wouldn't let us have this if it wasn't true. And I'm just going to accept it, that Paul was real, a good apostle. And since I did that, I've had so much peace. I don't know if I'm wrong, but.
Well, I've noticed that these people that hate Paul, they don't have peace on anything, because it's like Paul clouds their mind. They are addicted to Lashon Hara with Paul. They think that he's fair game. It was at that time when I wanted to look into the traditions of Paul's life outside his own letters. I'm not going to implicate myself in evil things when I'm writing to you. Well, I'm not into any evil things, but if Paul was in murder and all this stuff, and he says he was, that there's got to be some backstory of this. How can the man just change his spots and immediately go out and do what he did? It says he went down to Arabia. For how long? A couple of years? Well, Arabia is Idumea. And Idumea is famous for what? That's where the Herods all came from. They still, during their lives through the first century, they still had strong ties to Idumea. Go ahead, sir. I'm just taking time up here. Sean?
Thanks, brother. I think you've pretty much proven to me in the past that Paul was basically a proselyte trying to go for the high priest role because he wanted Poppea. I think that's exactly what happened. And I think there is a lot of Paul. This is the problem I have with Paul. The biggest one is simple, is that Paul in Corinthians, and Corinthians is one of his accepted letters, and this is one of his writings that is actually, if you read the authentic letters of Paul, this is actually one of his original writings, I think. He says that if you are in the company of what he calls weak believers, and then you are not to eat food that has been sacrificed to idols, not for their own conscience, but for the conscience of the weak people. So he's basically saying it's okay to do it as long as you're not around these weak people, so you don't offend them. Yahshua in Revelation 2 specifically condemns the church at, I think, Ephesus and one other for eating, or not Ephesus, I can't remember which one it was, but eating food sacrificed to idols. He specifically says that. And in Acts 15, remember the council, those were 4 decrees that James the Just and Peter and all of them put out to Paul, wrote it in letters and told him to deliver it, that specifically forbade them to eat food offered to idols. And yet Paul was teaching his message that it was okay as long as they don't see you, basically. That is not and that is why I say I take Peter over Paul, because I believe what Peter said when he says, listen, when he's talking about Simon Magus, he says, you tell me that you learned from a vision. I'm telling you, I learned face to face. I'm paraphrasing all this. And Peter says, how can we believe you when you say you heard a vision, when we've seen with our own eyes and heard from the Messiah with our own? So, and that's the same problem I have with Paul. Ultimately, we only have the word of Paul. And the Bible says 2 to 3 witnesses. We only have Paul's witness 2 or 3 times, yes, but only out of Paul's mouth. Nobody else does anything. When Paul was arrested in Jerusalem, none of James or none of those guys stood up for him. That to me is a tremendously strong testimony, because James just was the main. I mean, this was Yeshua's brother. We all perfectly know how holy James the Just was and how he walked. So if him, Kepha, other people have a clear teaching that's put out in the Didactics and other places, and then Paul has an authentic writing, as far as we know of, that contradicts that, then I take Peter, James, and Yeshua every single time over Paul, no matter what. And that's kind of how I feel. So I don't hate Paul, but everything I read of Paul, I take with a grain of salt, because Paul does add some things to the scriptures. But you know what? If you cut Paul out of your Bibles, you wouldn't be losing a darn thing.
You just lose the history, and then, but you would still have a better doctrine, I think. There's certainly more Jewish oriented, but I did have a comment about that. Let me see, what was it? I can't remember right now. All right, we've got Greg Holsapple is next. Good to see you, Greg.
Good to be here. Yes, I was. I think that what a lot of people miss with Paul is, especially being like the military, prior military, when you're enlisted, so to speak, when you think you're doing the right thing, then, in your heart and mind, no matter what battle, what country, where you get sent to, that's your job. You're going to destroy the enemy. That is the enemy, and that's your job, and that's what that's what you're good at. And I think that's what his mission was, until he found out maybe he was on the wrong team, maybe he was on the wrong road, until he found out what he was really doing is where the change up there is. And then for like Brother Craig was saying, when we start rearranging or taking people or talking and taking in or out, we also have to remember that they took Yahweh out. So some of those words may not even be Paul's words. It might be something that maybe Stewart or, maybe King James and their council said, hey, let's throw this and let's throw that. But we know there's so many documents, so many different things out there that it adds up pretty good. But when we kind of, lean one side or other because of a verse or because of something that could have so easily been a lion scribe, it could have been a council, it could have been anything that we don't really truly know that he even said. So that's where I kind of be careful of how that, because he may never even have said some of these things that people are trying to make him to be, so he obviously, and for everybody to walk away from him, that happens a lot. That when you're out here trying to, do the right thing, you can't hardly find a friend sometimes. There's people that will just totally, family and all, will just leave you and call you, they ain't going to go to bat. They ain't going to be crucified. They ain't going to get beaten, stoned for you. They're going to say, hey, that guy's crazy. We disagree. We don't, so that's just my take on it.
Good. Are you fighting the devil every day? I think you are.
Yes, I think.
Oh, I wanted to talk just a minute about this once again, about Jesus talking to Peter. I thank you for putting this quote in here. It's Matthew 16:23. He turned and said to Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of Elohim, but those that be of men." Now, this is significant because of where he is, at Satan's mouth, at the bottom of Mount Hermon, up near Caesarea Philippi, way up north Israel, Mount Hermon at the bottom. Yes, there's a big opening. It looks like a mouth. Looks like I've been there, but it's hard to remember. I took some pictures, about 20 feet high at least. An oval cave opening where there are rocks coming down like teeth. And all around that cave opening are niches. The place was called Banias or Panias because they worship Pan there. And this was part of, you would see at that time, all kinds of idols there where they were. So Satan was undoubtedly there, but the idols were of Pan most of the time. I know Pan is the one that's half goat, half man. He's like the god of procreation, the god that is a rapist. So that's Bacchus. You find Bacchus everywhere. But I would suggest, I'm sure I have a picture here. Let me get it, and you talk, and I'll show this to you because it's important to know where he is. Anybody from Israel would know. People here, we don't know what the significance of that is.
Mount Hermon is also where the Watchers descended.
All right, I'm going to try to find this.
Yeah, I've seen that cave. I've read some things. There's a lot of really strange, not good stories from that area still, to even modern day ones.
Yeah, it's called Mouth of Baal. I guess that's where Onia is. I've got 4 pictures of it. I think they're all the same. Let's see. View. Where's my view? There. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, if you've seen this before, well, you've seen it once. That's enough. But if you haven't, here's what it looks like now. See all these niches? Inside is full of niches.
Yeah.
And let's see if I can get a better picture where it looks like a face. A little more like that. This is Mount Hermon. And as you said, the devils came down. 200 devils hit the top, broke through, came out the bottom. What an idea. It almost looks like this rock has been peeled off. Is that all then?
Oh, it really does look like that, doesn't it? It's crazy.
Here's a good one. Yes, it does. You can see they put eyes up here, and there's a niche up here. So I've got a collection of pictures here from the Unholy Land, artifacts from there. Sometime I'll show that to you. You can see them, and there's a lot of things like that. Okay, Mouth of Baal. How do you think that might be significant for what Yahshua is saying to Peter? Isn't that where he says, "Who do they say I am?" Right?
Yes, that's right. Because he says, "You are Christ," and then he says,
"That's Matthew 16.
And the gates of hell will not, overpower it or overcome it."
Let's take a look.
I think that kind of shows the same thing that, what a lot of people get to Paul about is man can be an evil device, can be possessed, can be, let himself do terrible things, or he can also, through Yeshua, be the light of the world.
Yeah, because I think he said something good too.
Right.
All right, here's a sign. Well, I'm going to be so embarrassed here it is. When Yahshua came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, that's way up north. Mm-hmm. He asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I, the Son of Man, am?" Now, he's identifying himself as a son of man. And the people say good things about him, certainly not that he was Pan or somebody like that, because they believe Pan was still alive. But who do you say that I am? And what does Kepha get? He gets a blessing. He says, "You're the Messiah, the Son of the living." God isn't in there. The Son of the living. Now he gets blessed. "Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you. My Father who is in heaven instead. And I also say to you that you are Kepha. And on this Kepha, actually, you are Petros. And on this Petros, I will build my," oh my gosh, he's going to build a church there. He's going to call it St. John the Divine Episcopal Church. I will build my church. Every time I see that in there, I get upset. And the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. Here's always a difficult passage. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Now, he says she found the keys to the kingdom of heaven. We ordained her in this group.
Of course.
Okay, she's big on YouTube, and she was a part of this ministry at one time.
You may contact us at Jackson Snyder Presents at this email address, veroyahad@gmail.com. That is VEROYAHAD@gmail.com. And let me remind you, you are listening to Jackson Snyder Presents with your host tonight, Bogdan G. Shrumkov. Thank you for listening. We'll be right back. Jackson Snyder Present is back. Join us now for more of this interesting discussion.
She said that the keys of the kingdom was Kabbalah. Why would she say that? I don't see any Kabbalah in here. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in the sky, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in the skies. Then he commands them to tell no one. Down here, Kipha is in trouble again. Yahshua is prophesying, and Kipha is trying to assure him that this won't happen. Get behind me, Satan. Again, is he talking to Peter? He says he said to Peter, there's another passage that he says something to Peter, and he says, when you are converted, feed my sheep. Do you remember that passage? When you are converted. And the story goes that he was converted when he saw Yahshua alive after his crucifixion. Where is that part? You are offense to me. When you are converted, feed my sheep. Wonder if I can find that. I just think I ought to know.
I don't think that's in the 4 Gospels in our Bibles, though. Isn't that something?
I don't know. I thought it was.
Is it John chapter 21?
That sounds about where it would be. It's at the end of one of those Gospels, John 21. Boy, you are smart, Vicky.
Not really. I Googled it.
You're so smart.
I just
He
typed,
is.
Peter, feed my sheep.
You are.
Breakfast? No, where is this?
That one talks about when you were young, you converted yourself. Verse 18 is the one you're thinking of, I think.
Seriously?
It starts in 15. He says it to him 3 times, right?
I don't think so. Let me look another place. It might be like in the King James Version. When you are converted, I've looked this before because it popped right up here. Luke 22:32, same kind of place, different gospel. Come on up. What's this? Slide player? Oh, hold on, please.
Hey, Jackson, what does that word, I'm on my phone, so I can't use my Bible program. What does that word converted mean in the original Greek?
I don't know, but I can tell you what the Latin means.
That's better than the old King James English, so.
Con means with, verted means green teeth. Vert is going someplace, venial. We could look that up. I can't find that. Luke 22, right? I'm just getting
32.
22?
22 and 32.
All right, we'll try it again here. Yeah, here I've got it. You're already looking at it. Come on. It's down 32. Wow, way down here. Yeah, this is it. This is a different
When you have
turn. But of course, the King James and the New King James say when you are converted. I don't know what this is. English Standard Version. Okay, not so good.
Jackson, I'm looking it up. It's the Greek word. It's Greek 1994. Epistrepo, S-T-R-E-P-H-O.
Epistrepo.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what the Greek word is. It says to turn to the worship of the true God. This I don't like. It's kind of churchy anyway. But
first time I ever heard it, I was like a kid, and I remember the preacher talked about it, and he says, "Look, here we're at the end of the gospel, and Peter isn't yet converted.
It is verse 32 that says converted in the King James. You're right.
Does it? All right.
It does. It says, and when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren.
Mm-hmm. I think that probably converted. What's the difference here? Every time they talk about turning in both Greek and Hebrew, we're talking about shuv, we're talking about conversion, or turning back to the Torah. Epistrepho. Mm-hmm. Epi means on. I tell you, my Greek is getting really slim, and I can't even, I wonder, I'm having trouble with my computer here. So Sean, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, brother, but doesn't epi mean if it's before a word, doesn't it like strengthen it? Like, for instance, heavenly is Aranios, so then epi Aranios would actually be like the heaven of the or the heavens, or the above heavens or something?
It's a preposition, and you can translators give the prepositions in Greek especially myriad of different meanings, whatever seems right in their eyes. But when you, let me just look it up here. I don't have any resources here in this apartment. Epistrepho, Greek meaning. Well, with the O on the end, the omega, it means I return. So it's going to mean return. Epistrepho, epistrepho, get back, come back, return. For kapiamus ne in via. Why don't we do it in the road? Then next we're going to do get back. Imagine the Beatles song. We're calling this epistrepho. Epistrepho.
Thayer's gives the definition.
It says to turn to oneself in another place, to turn oneself about, to turn back. That's like metanoia, turn around, to return, turn back, come back. Come back. Once you come back, feed my sheep. And here's Bill Mounts on the subject. Now he's got definitions from the Septuagint. Have you ever looked at Bill Mounts' Greek site? Man, it's great. Free course there. Sometime when I'm totally Alzheimer'd, I'm going to go back to this thing, see if it makes any sense. Let's see, where are we? Oh, the books. I'm excited about just getting into hold on a minute. Unblurred. I'm afraid what you'll find back there. Taken to Heaven in 70 AD. I haven't looked at it yet, but that's very intriguing. The idea that they are going to show us the rapture in 70 AD. And this book, it's solid packed. With Dobbs, 200 pages here or more? 300 pages. Solid packed, scriptures, understanding the original languages. This really doesn't look like a book you'd turn over to somebody in the think tank. I mean, to say, it looks like hard to read. And
No, go ahead.
Please go ahead. I'm all done. I'm just taking some time.
Okay, I want to play the unpopular devil's advocate for a minute about this.
So you're going to be the devil. The devil make you do it.
Now, I want you to understand that I am in agreement with the 70 AD thing, like we just talked about. I agree all that. But this is my question, or this is one of my questions, okay? Now, with the book of Revelation, like we just pretty much said, you can pretty much just lay Josephus's wars next to it and kind of go through it and figure it out. So what we see is symbolic imagery of dragons and horns and all this, which actually represented, the Caesars and the generals and the rulers of that time and all physical things, basically.
Yes, even back in Daniel, they do horns.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all the same, right? So, okay, so if that's the case, I'm just thinking logically here, all the way through the chapters, all that stuff is describing the wars, basically from 67 to 73, okay, or 66 to 73. Okay, so then if that's true, then when you get to Revelation 20, with the return of Yahshua, the judgment, and then their new heaven, new earth. Now, this is the problem, is that sometimes when you speak to people about these things, they'll be like, well, that's the part, they'll say the whole book's fulfilled. And I go, well, then what about the last 2 chapters or the last 3 chapters? Well, either no, those ones are still yet future, or no, those were fulfilled too. They were just a spiritual kingdom. To which I say, stop.
Yeah,
you can't do that. You can't say the vast chunk of Revelation is symbolic of physical events and then spiritualize the last of it, but you can't make it fit. That's not how to work it. So that's something that I always chew on, and I've been chewing on for years and years about. So that's what kind of makes me think. And again, just playing devil's advocate, when we see in the news the plans of the sacrifice, then they actually start doing it again. And now I start thinking, why in the world are you going to do that again? Now, the last, 2 or 3 times in history, you've done that since way back in the first temple. I think there's a reason Yahweh took the Ark of the Covenant and they didn't have it after the first temple, because they were in a state of apostasy. And I think that they had been ever since. And that's what the whole little movement of Yeshua was, with his little group, and the Essenes coming out. We're trying to restore that back. And we saw how people reacted. I mean, the common people loved it and grew but the leadership was a totally different story. And we know how that. So I think that, so thinking at it kind of just from that, like a logical kind of thing, I think that you either got to spiritualize the whole book, or you have to say it was literal, or you have to just put those last chapters, listen, that's just the future. He hasn't came yet. That's yet future, which could possibly be too, So that's about all I had to say, brother.
Well, good. You identified something that's important, and that is Brother Shroomkoff's doctrine on the apocalyptic lie. There's a different, you ever heard that on one of those recordings?
I'm sure it is familiar. I don't know what you're talking about.
There's two different types of literature that we call prophecy, but they're not. They're different types. One's the apocalypse, one's the prophecy. I'll just give you two apocalypses that you know well. One's Daniel, the other's Revelation. Oh, let's see what else. Third Baruch, fourth Ezra. Those are apocalypses. Now you get the prophecy. You find that in the major and minor prophets in the Old Testament. Thus saith Yahweh. However, you never find that in apocalyptic literature. What you get in apocalyptic literature is something like a heavenly guide showing somebody around what's going on then, which is written in a spiritual way. So it can't be understood by those that they don't want to understand it. The apocalyptic lie is at the end of every apocalypse, at least all that I can think of, there is this heavenly kingdom. There is the fullness of coming. Look at Daniel. I can remember there's a Messiah, a prince, a Messiah. And in one of those prophecies, in one part, in 9, I think it's Daniel 9, help me. You have one prophecy of Messiah, and then you go to Daniel, is it 12 or 11? And you get the same thing over again, only corrected. Now, I can't get into that any farther except to say Shroomkoff calls it an apocalyptic lie because those things haven't happened, but they are indicative of apocalyptic literature, never prophecy. So I think that's one of the reasons a couple hundred years ago, they broke these prophetic-like books down into two different types. Apocalypse is not thus saith the Lord. You've got angel guide there. You got somebody being led around the heavenly realms. Enoch is another one. Only the apocalypse is telling their current history in terms that only good Jews can understand. Same with, and I say the end of Daniel, the end of Revelation, the same thing. He just got a little too literal with it. You know what I mean? By calling it the apocalyptic lie. And it was right after that happened that he ran into Clint Eastwood's gang. Clint, of course, accused him of kidnapping his little girl. Of course, Brother Shroomkoff had nothing to do with that, but they did catch him in an alley. I don't know if you remember this part. I think that it's in the animal apocalypse section. We actually have Clint on the telephone threatening him with death if he didn't turn back Clint's little girl. And so that's what happened to him about the apocalyptic lie. I would not suggest you tell anybody that because you might be next. But that's the difference between apocalypse and prophecy. And so you really have to make a difference when you talk about these things. That way you're not, well, who even in the AD 70, the end of the world, the author there, Peter Ellis, warned you about that. Warned you about fear. I think last time, Tuesday, I think you said something about that, Sean, like rubber dragons or something. People are scared to death about this. Do you know the disciples of Wash? I don't remember names anymore. And he's, Joe, what is his name? We did several, I guess, interviews, discussions with him about the and I met a lot of his disciples and students that believe what he's saying. I mean, they really believe. And they're scared people. They're scared out of their wits. Honestly.
Through death, fearful, young children.
Do you know some of those folk?
I know it very well.
Okay. Those guys are scared. All of them. The men are scared of what's going to happen. I think probably, well, I can say that I believe that's a false prophecy because he's using the Jewish calendar, unless that's the one Elohim's using now. And the last time we got together, I know it was Bishop Ragesh and I, we tried to correct him on his calendar. He didn't seem to have any knowledge of that the Jewish calendar was only calculated. It's really calculated every year.
We'd have to change his website.
Yeah, what's it called?
And if he goes against that, whether he, if he changes that out, I mean, you got to do the whole website over. And
that's right. Boy,
he's not going to.
He's my friend, but he's a little scary anyway.
I like him. I helped him with his one book, 2016. Actually.
Yeah, did you?
I did. Actually.
He's a good missionary, man. He does great.
He's a great guy. He really is. I've been to Sukkot with him where he was the speaker. He's a great guy. He really is. Very approachable, friendly, very kind. And and I don't think he's wrong about everything.
Of course not. But one thing he does say is he's adamant about being 100% right. He's adamant about it.
He is. He's like, prove it wrong. And if you try to, then it's very difficult to.
All right. Well, I did. And it was easy, but he didn't want to even listen to it. I don't think that changed our relationship any, but.
But I remember back in 2010, 2013, when everybody was going crazy over the Islam and everything that was going on. There were young teenage girls that were terrified, that these people were going to come into the land and rape them and cut their heads off. Young girls, 13, 14 years old. And, they were terrified. And it was really not a good thing. And because how do you balance that out with the mind of a young teenage person? That's
what they learn in teenage is going to affect them their whole life, especially in a religious sense.
Right. And it's just, I've seen a lot of people in that group that was terrified. I used to call him Sergeant Brillo.
Really?
Yeah, because I used to tell him he was about as abrasive as a Brillo pad.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, that is true. But we don't want to take anything away from him because he does just about everything right. But this fear.
He's right about a lot of stuff. He really is. Yeah.
He's a deep studier. I don't think that he's even working a job anymore.
I don't know.
His name is Swoosh. I told him right before we did the last session, there are 5 sessions. I said, in this session, I told him the first 4 sessions, I will not say anything against what you do. I will back you up insofar as possible. And same with Bishop Ragesh. But then we waited until about the last hour, the 5th session, and brought out the calendar thing. And so maybe, who knows, maybe Elohim is using that calculated yearly calendar of the Jews. I think a lot of them are coming into a new understanding here too, with the scholars now all pushing, well, they're not pushing it. They are exegeting this Sadducite calendar. But who knows? Something else might come along next week. But the calendar we're on just seems as close to being perfect as possible.
I'm hoping we're going to dig some more information out of the sand down over there in Egypt or Israel, one of the two.
Yeah, really. Don't think they haven't. I think it's happening like the mask that they found in Egypt with the earliest copy of Mark. They're putting them away as investments and not letting anybody see them. We haven't even heard anything about the lead codice. Now, how long's it been? 5-10 years? It's disappeared. I mean, somebody's taken it. You know what I'm talking about, the lead codice?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
It makes you wonder if the stories about the Vatican storing stuff down in their catacombs, they probably do have all kinds of, who knows what down there. I mean, if you think about it, they're just really, the Vatican Church is just the spiritual side of Rome. I mean, Rome's really never completely gone away. It just kind of transformed. So they've been there since Rome took over the Holy Land. So who knows what they have in their vaults or whatever.
Here's the lead codice. I think you're right. I'm sure there's stuff in there, but I think that these things, instead of going out like the Dead Sea Scrolls did and being held for 50 years, I think they're going into the bank accounts of investors. You remember this?
Yeah, I do. It's amazing. It
when
really
they
is.
first put this on, they said, this is the face of Jesus right here. Well, but nobody can figure it out, and now it's disappeared. I had this book, just sold it.
Hey, Jackson, I wanted to ask you something that's on the same subject. You know how the believers fled to Pella and stayed up in the caves above Pella?
Yeah.
I wonder, have they, I did a little research, not an extensive amount, but some. And I noticed that there hasn't been that much archaeological expeditions in those caves up there.
Expeditions of what?
Of the caves up there, digging in the caves, looking for
Really bad.
There may be some treasure trove of documents.
Yeah, and look at this. The Muslims are tearing out the bottom of the Temple Mount and throwing everything away. And now
Maybe that's what it was, yeah.
some people have found the dirt that they threw away and are sifting through it. And there was an artifact just found, a small, what was it? Do you all remember? I mean, just recently.
It was a silver, it was folded. I was like, wasn't it a curse? Wasn't that a curse?
Yeah, like an amulet.
Yes, it was a curse. It was yeah.
So what do you think that they're throwing away in there, the Muslim? But that's a scary thing, because I've even heard that the mosque there is kind of being, the foundations of the mosque could come down. Man, I was in that place. It's something else. There's a big rock in there. You got to go up and worship.
What did you think about that rock? Because they say that's the threshing floor rock, but it sure doesn't seem like it's a threshing floor stone to me.
No, I don't think so. That rock is not flat. It's not anything but a rock. They say that was the place where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac. They also said that's the place where Jesus ascended. There's one other thing. What would they all be doing on this rock in the middle of Orion? Yeah, right. I'd like to know more about this. I'd like to know more about Amarna and the so-called Third Temple.
Maybe we should send 2 spies in there.
Did you read that book? 2 spies went in. They say they found Sinai.
Right?
It's a good book. Tom something. Tom, what's with me and thinking? Now, I got one question for you and we'll quit. Why is it that if I go to a Catholic church, I feel a strong sense of holiness? It doesn't make sense to me. If I get in that, remember, I went to a Catholic seminary a couple of years. And when I even look at these Spanish-style seminaries and churches, I get a feeling of holiness.
I think a lot of the people there, that's the reason why they're there. They want to be holy. They think what they're doing is right. Some of them, they sang the praises of Yahweh. They just, I've heard that some of them just started taking them out, that they actually was singing. And, a lot of them, I think the ones that are there, they just don't know the whole full story, but they think they're doing the right thing. So when 2 or more are gathered, if they think they're doing right,
That's a good opinion.
Right.
To our close friends in Messiah, Vero, Essene, Yahad, and our branches invite you to join us in our quest to share meaning with thinking believers all over the globe through the Internet. We believe that the Internet is a special tool of our Heavenly Father, and it may well be a temporary tool. We're doing the work of an evangelist through audios, videos, podcasts, literature, and personal contact to promote the most primitive roots of our common faith. It's not for everyone, but for those whom the Ruach seeks to join with the little flock of hopefulness through Moshiach, Torah, and verified apostolic manuscripts and roots. Yes, for a tiny flock, our Father has blessed us with a staggering number of inquiries into these roots, and we're doing our best to honor Father by fulfilling each one for the last 20 years. We understand that if we're going to keep on, we need more people dedicated to the way to complete our common ministry for the future. And we have been moved to invite you to step into the water with us and do the common work of an evangelist. There's much more to tell you about membership, but there is enough information to get you started recorded on our webpage at this link, joinyahad.org. joinyahad.org. Surf on over. If you feel called to what you read there, or what you've heard in our various venues and witnesses, you'll also find on that page a link to our primary membership form. We hope you'll take a few minutes to read that page, pray about what you should do and how you might help. If you feel a calling, fill out the membership form and click Submit. We hope you will. And we hope that when you do, you'll be given a vision for our new direction in Yahad in 2021 and following. Sincerely, your friend, Jackson Snyder, writing on behalf of the members and friends of this ministry. Again, that link is joinyahad.org. And if you're not already out there, here are a few more facts. The Vero Essene Yahad, New Earth Restoration, and Douglas Essene Ministries are equal opportunity ministries that are chartered in Florida as a volunteer association, equal opportunity for men and women of all ethnic and religious backgrounds. We're Messianic Essene, modeling our ministry on the primitive doctrine and practice of the community rule, the Didactics, and the 3 Testaments of the Bible. The Yahad is the legal and recognized ordaining organization in the apostolic succession and a valid cover agency for professional ministers. We were organized through the prophetic word and dedicated to the Nazarene Essene Israelite faith.